They were very much the couple of the time.
The ghosts of relationships past may be coming back to haunt Jennifer Lopez in the wake of startling allegations against her ex, P. Diddy.
But there is a universe where she could testify against him in terms of, violence, in terms of his interactions with other artists.
We're breaking down the tumultuous 2-year relationship between J-Lo and Diddy in the early aughts.
They were definitely at the top of everybody's list in terms of events. Their pictures were everywhere. It was just kind of in the advent of social media. So there was just definitely a lot of press and buzz around their relationship at the time.
Before we take a walk down memory lane and the relationship that took early 2000s pop culture by storm, let's talk about why we're all here, P. Diddy. He's known by many names: Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puffy, Sean Combs. The 54-year-old has been renowned for decades as a rapper, producer, and label exec who has now found himself in some serious hot water. Just this week, federal investigators raided 2 of Diddy's homes, both in Holmby Hills in California and on Star Island in Miami. While officials haven't told us the specifics, like whether Diddy himself is a target of the investigation, we can make reasonable inferences, at least according to former homicide prosecutor Bernardo Villalona.
Just because there was a search warrant that was executed at his home, again, doesn't mean that he was a target of the search warrant. But of course, by just the reasonable inferences that you can make that he is the target of the search warrant, it could take some time because, number one, if they did take any electronic devices from his home or from his person, they have to be able to conduct a forensic examination from those devices. And it will depend. Are there passcodes? Are they able to break those passcodes and get through those devices in order to get that information? And then what is in those electronic devices? Is there anything that's incriminating in those criminal devices that can be used against them? Because again, it's not about making an arrest, especially when you're talking about Puff Daddy, Sean Diddy Combs. You want to make sure that if he is arrested and he is prosecuted, that you can prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. So you want to make the best and strongest case possible in the very beginning before you make an arrest. So to be honest, it can be any day or it can be months from now, or nothing can happen. They can say we don't have enough credible evidence to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt and leave it at that. Because again, a civil lawsuit is completely different than a criminal prosecution. Civil lawsuit, the burden is more likely than not, as opposed to a criminal prosecution. You have to be able to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and you don't want to get left with egg on your face if you don't get a conviction.
So Diddy hasn't been charged criminally, but it's likely several lawsuits led up to those federal investigations. So let's break those down. First, there's the lawsuit by Diddy's ex, Cassandra Ventura, also known as the singer Cassie. Cassie filed this suit under New York's Adult Survivors Act. That act meant that between November 2022 and November 2023, sexual assault survivors could file civil suits against their alleged predators, regardless of whether the statute of limitations had passed. Cassie's lawsuit dropped several major bombshells, including her claims that Diddy beat her, that he raped her, and also forced her to have sex with prostitutes while recording it on video. Cassie's lawsuit also alleged that Diddy made her carry a gun.
I'm sure that those people that are named in that lawsuit are very nervous right now, very nervous, even more nervous now after the execution of that search warrant, but also nervous because he revealed about these secret recordings, and they're wondering whether they could have been secretly recorded. Are there recordings of them engaging in these type of activities? Because even though it may not be criminal, some of those activities, it still does tarnish their image, so they can still take a toll in terms of their branding. But in terms of the lawsuit itself, it's very damaging. You got to think that several companies have already distanced themselves from Puffy, and there haven't been any criminal charges. All you see is a civil lawsuit. So I think there's still going to be more things that are going to come about as a result of that civil lawsuit. But I think the most damaging, again, is Cassie's lawsuit. But more importantly, I think is Little Rod's lawsuit that was filed.
Lil Rod's lawsuit also brought several more bombshells, which we'll get to in a minute. But we can't talk about the New York Survivors Act without mentioning Joy Dickerson Neal. who also filed suit under the act against Diddy last November. So Joy says Diddy videotaped an assault of her back in 1991 when she was a student at Syracuse University. According to the lawsuit, Diddy drugged Joy, sexually assaulted her, and then passed around the videotape of this assault to other people in the music industry. At the time the lawsuit was filed, Diddy's rep called it a money grab. Diddy's rep had a similar statement about Lil Rod's civil suit that was filed last month, calling it pure fiction. Lil Rod's lawsuit is where we learned more about Diddy and multiple other defendants and associates listed in the nearly 100-page document. To start, Lil Rod alleged Diddy sexually assaulted him and forced him to have sex with prostitutes. He also name-dropped celebrities Diddy had associated with, like Cuba Gooding Jr., Prince Harry, and of course, Jennifer Lopez. While there are no claims of wrongdoing by Prince Harry or J-Lo, the allegations Lil Rod leveled against Cuba Gooding Jr. are pretty stark and include photos. The pics show Diddy and Cuba together, with Diddy's arms on Cuba's. Then there's another pic, this one of Lil Rod and Cuba together, and Cuba actually has his arm around Lil Rod. Lil Rod alleges Diddy was, quote, grooming him to pass him off to his friends. This fear became reality when Mr. Combs introduced Mr. Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. when they were on Mr. Combs' yacht. Court docs go on to state, quote, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's legs, his inner thighs near his groin, the small of his back near his buttocks, and his shoulders. He rejected his advances, and Mr. Gooding Jr. did not stop until Mr. Jones forcibly pushed him away. Then there's the matter of Prince Harry, who is brought up just once in the lawsuit. His name appears toward the end of it, and it reads, quote, Mr. Combs was known for throwing the best parties. Affiliation with and or sponsorship of Mr. Combs' sex trafficking parties garnered legitimacy and access to celebrities such as famous athletes, political figures, artists, musicians, and international dignitaries like British royal Prince Harry. So Prince Harry is not accused of any wrongdoing. His name is likely listed as a way to bolster Lil Rod's claims of Diddy's celeb influence. All that brings us back to Jennifer Lopez, J-Lo, Jenny from the block, Diddy's girlfriend from 1999 to 2001. She's listed in the lawsuit in relation to a 1999 nightclub shooting in New York. Here's how it reads in the court docs. It states Diddy's, quote, RICO enterprise has existed for at least 20 years, dating back to the 1999 nightclub shooting in NYC, when Mr. Combs required his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez to transport his illegal firearm into the NYC nightclub. To understand that allegation and break down J-Lo's entire relationship with Diddy, I spoke to former prosecutor Melba Pearson. When I ask you about P. Diddy and J-Lo, what do you think of with their relationship?
I think tumultuous. I think it couple of the late 90s, early aughts. And I definitely think, they were two music moguls. J-Lo was really coming into prominence at that time. Diddy was already a mogul at the top of his game in terms of R&B and hip hop. So, they were very much the couple of the time, the same way we look at, I guess Ben Affleck and J-Lo right now, even though I wouldn't call them the it couple at present, but they were definitely at the top of everybody's list in terms of events. Their pictures were everywhere. It was just kind of in the advent of social media, so there was just definitely a lot of press and buzz around their relationship at the time.
To understand their relationship, we have to head back to the late 90s when J-Lo was fresh off filming the hit movie Selena. At the time, she was working on her debut album to be called On the Six. Diddy was hired to co-write and produce a song for the album called Feelin' So Good. The two started working together professionally, which quickly turned into something a bit more, and they started dating. The first time we saw them publicly was in September 1999 at the MTV Music Video Awards, where J-Lo was nominated for Best Female Video. Diddy was also nominated for Best New Artist in a Video, Best Pop Video, and Best Dance Video. It was the next year, though, that J-Lo broke the internet, even before that was a thing, with the green dress at the Grammys and her date was P. Diddy.
I think that Diddy added to her brand. I think the fact that she was dating a celeb and walking the red carpet. I mean, we all remember the green Versace dress, right? That she wore with Diddy to, I believe it was the Grammys or something along those lines, or something, a big award show.
J-Lo's legal troubles with Diddy date back to 1999, though, what Lil Rod outlined in his lawsuit, saying she carried Diddy's illegal weapon that was used in a nightclub shooting.
Apparently there's some sort of dispute broke out and a shooting occurred. Now, Little Rod is alleging that J-Lo brought the firearm in her purse to the club and then handed it off to, either Diddy or Shine or whoever the person was that actually committed the actual threatening or shooting. And so, basically the allegations from Little Rod were that Diddy or Puff Daddy, Sean Combs, confessed to him that he was the one that did the shooting. Now, in a court of law, it played out a lot differently because back in 1999, all of them were arrested, including J Lo, Diddy, and Shine. J Lo's charges were dropped immediately, but both Diddy and Shine ended up proceeding to trial. And so Diddy was acquitted at trial. Shine was not. He ended up being convicted on weapons charges and reckless endangerment and ended up going to prison as a result. So I can see Shine being a little upset right now, especially in light of the fact that there was evidence that may have possibly acquitted him. So I'm very curious to see what legal avenues that Shine might be exploring, especially in the wake of this confession, or will he leave well enough alone and say, listen, I did my time. It's all ancient history. Let's just kind of move on with things. So that's going to be, I think, very interesting moving forward in terms of his confession or alleged confession and what may result from that.
According to reports, after the shooting, Diddy and J-Lo fled from the scene in an SUV and ran nearly a dozen red lights in an effort to evade cops. They were eventually arrested on a weapons possession charge. J-Lo was held in jail for about 12 hours before her charges were dropped. So J-Lo was arrested back then, charged, and those charges were then dropped. But now, 25 years later, we're having this bombshell allegation that she brought this illegal firearm and she was somewhat involved. So is it possible she faces charges, or could the statute of limitations get in the way?
The statute of limitations would have long run by now. This is, 25 years later. Usually, in terms of statutes of limitations, you see 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, usually somewhere in that single digit range, right? The one charge that does not have a statute of limitations is that of murder. And that's not alleged to have happened here. So I don't see any way that she's going to face criminal liability as a result of her bringing a gun to the nightclub that night. Now, is there a possibility of maybe some civil action or something along those lines? Maybe, but I think that's tenuous at best. So I don't see any legal ramifications impacting JLo as a result of her being involved in this shooting or allegedly being involved in this shooting back in 1999.
Even had JLo's charges stuck, Melba says it's not likely she would have served any time. If she had been convicted, how long could she have spent behind bars? What would that have looked like?
Yeah, so again, it depends on what charges she would have had placed against her. Now, would it be, just illegal possession of a firearm? Carrying a concealed firearm back at that time, that would have been a misdemeanor. So that may have been, maximum exposure of a year. Was she charged with actually in being involved in the incident? So did she actually threaten someone? Did she take a more active role? Did she point the gun and then pass it to Diddy or something along those lines? That falls into a different category because now that would be aggravated assault with a firearm. And that has a minimum mandatory. That would have been a 3-year minimum mandatory, and she would have been facing 15 years in prison. So it all depends on the nuances of what she would have been charged with or what she was alleged to have done. Simply carrying the firearm and it wasn't registered to her or anything along those lines. She didn't have a concealed weapons permit because, again, back in 1999, there wasn't permitless carry like there is in Florida now. So she could have been charged from that perspective. But again, somebody with no criminal history, obviously going to bring in the best defense attorneys. There was no universe that I really saw that she would have been going to prison for that.
From the late 90s and her arrest until now, we've seen some major changes in JLo.
So JLo clearly went through a transformation over the course of the last literally 25 years, where she was more Jenny from the block. She was very much, hyping up her affiliation and her origins from the Bronx, New York. And she was very much within that hip hop world. So going to those, Source Awards and those types of events and parties. And, she was dating hip hop artists and all of that. So she was very much in a different space than where she is now, which is more, she's just kind of she's with Ben Affleck now. She's got her health line that she's doing, so she has different ventures that way. So she's kind of moving away from that hip hop rough and tumble origins, more so to trying to give a different impression of who she is. She'll still say, "Oh yeah, I'm from the Bronx," but she's not really giving that Jenny from the block vibe like she was in the late '90s, early 2000s.
Based on the difference between J-Lo then, Jenny from the block, and Jennifer Lopez now, as we said, she's changed a lot, both in what she does in her career and just personality, relationships, things like that. She's a whole new person now. So how would this damage her reputation? All of these allegations that are coming out from her past, is it possible that they could damage her now?
It is possible, but again, we have to look at the time frame, right? These are events that happened 25 years ago. I think arguably those of us who were around 25 years ago could say that we've definitely evolved over the course of time, right? And so everyone should get grace to grow and improve and to change the direction of their lives. So I don't think it's going to be a huge damage to her brand. I think it's going to be momentary discussion. So we'll be talking about it now. We'll be talking about, did she know more at the time in terms of the types of activities that Diddy was involved in? Was he, actively harming other people and maybe she knew about it and didn't say anything? There were some allegations at the time, and she did kind of drop some hints in several interviews that he was controlling in some ways and that he was cheating on her. So there was infidelity. There was clearly a lot of toxicity in that relationship. So she's touched on that. So I think she might be able to put enough distance between those events at that time and where she is now that she can do damage control in terms of her brand. I don't think it's going to be incredibly detrimental in the long run.
Let's fast forward to right now. So P. Diddy has not been charged criminally. Most of what we know is all from these civil lawsuits. But let's say that he does get charged criminally. What happens then? Could J-Lo be called to testify against him?
It's possible. It's absolutely possible. If I was the prosecutor handling that case, I absolutely would list her, right? But of course, we need to know whether or not she'd be cooperative. That, of course, changes the strategy when it comes to trial. So you may list someone as a potential witness. That does not mean you're necessarily going to call them. The question is whether or not their testimony is really going to help you. But there is a universe where she could testify against him in terms of, violence, in terms of his interactions with other artists, especially the folks that have been coming forward alleging that he has harmed them in some way or engaged in, human trafficking and sex trafficking. So was she aware of any of that going on? Did she see him with underage girls, or was she present for when some of those videos were taken that Little Rod included screenshots of those videos in his pleadings? So how much of that did she know? When did she know it? And what actions did she take at the time? Is that part of the reason why they broke up? We don't know. So all of this will remain to be seen. Obviously, the prosecution and law enforcement need to speak with her, get a statement from her to understand what she knows or what she could be able to testify to, and then make appropriate decisions from there.
Melba says questions about Diddy's alleged abuse could come out if J-Lo is put on the stand. According to reports, Diddy was the first person to cheat on J-Lo. She told CBS Sunday Morning in 2019, quote, We had this kind of crazy, tumultuous relationship that ended in a bang.
There have been allegations of some sort of abuse or some sort of controlling behavior. And that's actually not uncommon when you see situations of women getting caught up in the criminal justice system as a result of the actions of their boyfriend, partner, spouse, whatever the case may be. So this is not a unique scenario in terms of she was the one carrying the gun and then passed it to her then boyfriend for the shooting and the incident to occur. Sadly, we see that a lot in the criminal justice system where the woman ends up trying to cover or help her boyfriend or partner, in a way that they maybe have thought was innocuous or didn't think it was going to result in what it did, and then a whole horrible situation ensued. So sad, but not unique or uncommon.
Speaking about her carrying the weapon allegedly, it's interesting because that happened in 1999 that J-Lo allegedly had this weapon or gun. But then Cassie Ventura also said in her lawsuit that was filed back in November that she also was required to carry a gun because of Diddy. So do those two things corroborate each other?
I think it does, absolutely, because clearly this is a pattern of control that he has over the women in his life. And again, forcing them to do illegal activity because, again, you're carrying an unregistered gun. It all depends, of course, on the gun laws in the state, but you're carrying a gun that's not registered to you, and it's probably going to be for criminal activity because why couldn't Diddy carry a gun, right? To the best of my knowledge, I don't believe that he has a criminal history that would prevent him from doing so. He certainly has the means to be able to hire a bodyguard or security staff. So why are you going to have the lady in your life carry a weapon on your behalf? That's just very strange to me. So that leads me to believe that this is a control type situation. And of course, Cassie saying the same thing happened to her decades after J-Lo just brings more truth to what's being said. And again, just raises a lot of eyebrows and a lot of questions around who Diddy really is, not just the public persona that we've, been led to believe or see.
And even though criminal charges have yet to be filed against Diddy, Melba believes it's only a matter of time.
I think that criminal charges will be filed. There's no question in my mind. The question is just when. That's the big pressing issue at this point. Seeing again that the federal agents are doing their investigation. One thing I will say that federal cases do not come together without rock solid evidence, and the feds will not file charges against you unless they know. Almost beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're going to be able to convict you, or that they firmly believe that they're going to be able to convict you with video, audio, surveillance, corroborating testimony, social media, everything. So it is my belief that that's what they're in the process of putting together now. And the question just will be when the charges are coming, because again, there's going to be a huge volume of evidence. We're looking at multiple states. We're looking at potential activity over in crimes overseas, much like we saw in the Epstein case. So being able to collect all those pieces of evidence is going to take some time. So that's why I don't think charges are coming next week, but I do think they're going to be coming soon.
And amidst the raids to Diddy's home, Melba says the feds are probably already in contact with Jennifer Lopez.
We're looking at federal agents, and we're looking at a scenario where we're looking at multiple states and activities that happened in multiple states, possibly even overseas. So I would think that ground one would be who are the friends and associates who are closest to him in his circle, and start to talk to every single one of them to see who has relevant information, who can be persuaded to testify against him, or who is going to be absolutely like, I'm not going to snitch, I have nothing to say, or they just literally don't have the knowledge, they just weren't present or were not privy to certain things. So I would think that law enforcement already reached out, or is in the process of maybe speaking with her legal counsel to figure out, okay, she can sit down for a statement, this is what it would look like, etc.
J-Lo and Diddy broke up in 2001. She's since gone on to marry Chris Judd, Mark Anthony, and most recently, Ben Affleck. Is it possible, if these two don't cross paths, that J-Lo isn't who she becomes today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the biggest boost to her career was playing Selena. And that was the role that brought her to prominence. And, that's sort of when her music really started taking off and all of that. I think that Diddy added to her brand. I think the fact that she was dating a celeb and walking the red carpet, I mean, we all remember the green Versace dress, right? That she wore with Diddy to, I believe it was the Grammys or something along those lines, a big award show. So I think that his contributions to her career definitely got her to where she is today. To say that she never would have made it without him, I'd hesitate to say that, but definitely he improved her visibility and her brand. So I'm going to give her credit, of course, for the hard work she put in to get to where she is today. I never would want to take that away from her, but I think that having that access and that also that extra media attention was another way to get more eyeballs on her, which then increased record sales, increased opportunities in film, etc.
As for Diddy, on top of his home being raided this week, his alleged drug mule was also arrested, reportedly while trying to board his private plane in Miami.
Yeah, no, put them in the car. I'll do this.
That's 25-year-old Brendan Paul, who was arrested and booked for cocaine and controlled substance possession. Florida officers were working with Homeland Security and Customs when they found drugs in his luggage. Paul was also listed in Lil Rod's civil suit against Diddy, where he's described as an alleged drug mule who acquires and distributes Mr. Combs's drugs and guns. We'll refer back to Bernarda to explain this one.
So far, Brendan has only been arrested for possession of a controlled substance, and this is for the narcotics that they recovered, I believe, in one of his bags that was on the airplane where he was stopped in the airport, Miami airport, on Monday. So they haven't linked that to Puffy at all. As of now, it's just for the simple possession, which is still a felony. The question that I will have and I'm curious to see what will happen is that whether they're going to use those charges against Brendan to try to flip him, to try to get him to cooperate against any type of prosecution against Puffy or others. I mean, a felony, you can still do jail time. So it's still a serious matter. It's still a serious charge because you can do jail time having to deal with felony possession of narcotics. But just because he just got charged with those two counts, it doesn't mean that in the future he's not going to be charged with several other counts. It all depends where this investigation leads. But again, if I were Puffy, if I were anyone that were associated with Brendan Paul, I would be nervous because it's possible that he can cooperate in order to avoid any jail time and actually sing on other people.
As for all these allegations, Diddy's team has made several statements. In response to the raids of Diddy's home, his attorney released a statement on Tuesday reading, quote, "Yesterday there was a gross overuse of military-level force as search warrants were executed at Mr. Combs's residences. There is no excuse for this excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities or the way his children and employees were treated." As far as the allegations dropped in Lil Rod's lawsuit, Diddy's attorney Sean Hawley says, quote, "His reckless name dropping about events that are pure fiction and simply did not happen is nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner headlines. We have overwhelming, indisputable proof that his claims are complete lies. Our attempts to share this proof with Mr. Jones's attorney, Tyrone Blackburn, has been ignored as Mr. Blackburn refuses to return our calls. We will address these outlandish allegations in court and take all appropriate action against those who make them." Diddy himself commented on the civil suits back in December, writing, quote, "Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation, and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth. So far, J-Lo hasn't made any public statements about the allegations against Diddy. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.